Can Beijing+25 be truly transformative? It can, if it's more than just a celebration, if it has a concrete outcome and a roadmap to achieve a feminist and women's movement action plan with generation equality. The challenge is ensuring our feminist and women's movements use Beijing+25 to advance a feminist and women's movement action plan with generation equality. We need to be able to leverage the power of global consensus and forge new alliances. We need to organize so that we can use the Beijing Platform for Action, CEDAW, and the SDGs, along with other international treaties, human rights mechanisms, and international commitments, such as the International Conference on Population and Development, Habitat, UN Security Council resolutions on women, peace and security, and related resolutions, as well as the Paris Climate Accord, to promote accountability and achieve a gender-equitable and sustainable world. This means we have to get organized. What is being proposed is an open, welcoming, inclusive process that brings together the wide diversity of the feminist and women's movements, creative, action-oriented, brave, and space. It means using the power of existing political commitments and legally binding obligations and avoiding reinventing the wheel. What does this mean? This requires a study of the relevant legal guarantees of rights and state obligations, as well as the recommendations and commitments made. It requires a critique of actions not taken, a prioritizing of actions. It means engagement with international women's human rights mechanisms. These will include actions at national, regional, and even sub-regional level, as well as global levels, that should be accompanied by measurable results and indicators that are time-bound. What will we achieve in 2 years, 5 years, and in 10 years? So it's time to meet Nalini Singh. Nalini is the Executive Director of the Fiji Women's Rights Movement, one of the members of the Asia-Pacific CSO Forum, who are organizing a meeting, in fact the Asia-Pacific Beijing+25 Regional CSO Forum, that's taking place in November, ahead of the UN ESCAP meeting for the Asia-Pacific region.
Every 5 years, we've had a moment to reflect and review on our regional commitment or our international commitments in relation to whichever issue the commitment is based on. So for Beijing Platform for Action, this is another such important milestone. And what makes it more special is this is beyond the 20 years that were marked for the Platform for Action. And we are looking at 25 years because we have not achieved what that Platform for Action had actually asked for. So it's a basically getting together civil society, those activists and feminists and women's rights, people who work in the women's rights movement, as well as member states, to come together again to reflect on, we agree that we have not achieved what we were supposed to. What more from here if we really do want to achieve this? And with the rollout of the Sustainable Development Goals, it becomes even more important for us as those working in the women's rights movement to ensure that there is no rollback or even some sort of suppression of what the Beijing Platform for Action actually demands member states to be doing, because what we see is more of an emphasis on the Sustainable Development Goals, but not so much of an effort on Beijing. So this year and next year marks these important moments for us, where we do have to reflect, and as countries, to see where are we, because it's our governments who have promised on achieving this particular agenda for women 25 years ago. And where are we moving at the moment in terms of saying, well, women's rights and women's issues are being considered so important. They are also present in the SDGs, but what does it mean for Beijing Platform for Action in itself? It cannot die. That's why it's very important for us in country to have these review processes, to have a consensus on where are we, what have we achieved, what is not being achieved, and why, what should be done further, and then coming together as a region to again have those discussions, because we know that there are regional trends that impact us as well. So coming together to then see what are the congruence of issues at the regional level, and of course at the global level, to have recommitment, a stronger political recommitment back into what the Beijing Platform for Agenda, including the issues that are affecting us women now, because that document was done 25 years ago, and there are some issues that are not there. So, we're talking about climate change, we're talking about, cybersecurity, we're talking about the kind of violence and harassment we experience, and the interlinkages, intersectionalities, aspects of women's lives and what we experience, all of that should be coming into a focus for discussions.
As a women's rights activist in a feminist organization, what do you feel are the biggest rollbacks we're experiencing in the Pacific, or even you have experience working in Asia, both Asia and Pacific? Because I can remember at the Beijing conference in '95, the most contentious section was women's health. And you had all the member states debating politically about controlling women's health. And we're still seeing sexual reproductive health and rights, rolling back and being a political bargaining box, if you want. Is that something that you're seeing as well of concern?
I would say one of the issues, yes. And more so when you interlink it with all the, shall we say, the contextual issues we see in the region. So when we look at, of course, patriarchy is a persisting, systemic barrier that we have, and I don't even think we have created any dents in there, or very little in the last 20, 30 years. So that remains as a serious challenge to us. And then this compounded with increasing militarization across the region. We see the rise of conservatism and religious cultural fundamentalisms, across Asia Pacific, in various forms. We can't even associate it with one particular religion. It's with so many different religions, rearing its head, from, what we see in India with Hindu fundamentalisms, from what we see in Burma with Buddhist fundamentalism, or Sri Lanka, and moving into other countries with Christianity and others. So that, and what we have as, I think, the global trends of the kinds of trade we are seeing, the neoliberal globalized versions of trade, where we are putting power and profit over people, and that has had significant, or still continues to have significant impact, on women. And so then when you look at other specific issues that impact women, so we're talking about women's sexual and reproductive health and rights, yes, of course, because one, from not having access to the kind of quality services and that are needed for a woman to, one, decide on how many children she wants to have, to having access to contraception as a younger woman, to having abortion if she, unfortunately, she does need the service. All of these things, including as you progress through your life cycle, becomes very important. Now, compounding that with other things like climate change, where you can see the quality of water being affected. How do you then deal with that situation? You have a situation where climate change is affecting the food, quality of food that we have. So how do we then look at how healthy a woman is as she goes through the life cycle, bearing children, etc. So and on the other hand, we see governments moving towards privatizing healthcare. So and then who is questioning this and why? What are the motives for doing that? And when we see more and more out-of-pocket expenses for women and people in general, and where is the money going to? So the interconnectedness of all these other issues, it impacts on a woman's life. This is the time to, I think, claim back that space, and Beijing Platform for Action is one such key document that gives us the commitments that we need from our governments and for us as civil society and women's rights activists to claim back and to work together to ensure that in the next 5-year review at least we would have made somewhat of a progress and a difference in the positive.
The Asia Pacific CSO Forum, ahead of the ESCAP-led government meeting, how can you get involved? Obviously, there are opportunities for people to apply, but will there be online conversations? How can one get involved in that process?
Yes, so as we are planning and organizing the CSO Forum, which is going to be for 3 days, in Bangkok just before the intergovernmental meeting. So the applications for that is out now, and these are on various websites, including the ESCAP website. And it's good if you can put in your application early. There's a little bit of funding available for scholarships. The steering committee is putting aside as much as we can from the funds we have to allow for participation. And so what I'm asking our Pacific sisters is to make sure you put in your applications early enough, and with as much detail as you can in your applications, which will make your application strong enough to be chosen. And we're looking at about 150 women from Asia and Pacific to participate. And from here, we hope to have a strong declaration of our own that we can carry forward not only to the ESCAP meeting, but also into CSW and to the Mexico and Paris meetings as well.
Speaking of CSW 64, then, with this your own, if you want, a feminist political declaration from Asia Pacific, how would you want to influence CSW next year, given that it's not going to be the usual process of a negotiated outcome, or will it be?
Yes.
There's all sorts of negotiations that happen in the background, right?
So, I mean, one of the key things that we as part of the global women's movement have said that we should not open the Beijing Platform for Action for negotiation, because given the current trends we see in terms of the political negotiations, we think that if we did open it up, there's going to be a regression in terms of the commitments it has. So CSW, we are hoping for a political outcome statement, a political declaration from member states, which reaffirms Beijing, including all the other emerging issues that we are seeing now, so that document commits member states back into committing further and delivering on the Beijing agreements, and as well as then taking forward that commitment into Mexico and Paris, because those are the meetings that we hope will galvanize more support. We are talking about, of course, governments to be more supportive on the agenda, but as well as to see, we do need to have more resources. So who's willing to put in more resources to ensure that there is an achievement of the agenda, and to see, we do need the spaces to convene and talk about the issues that affect us. So it's good to see that Mexico and Paris have agreed to create this space. Spaces are very far away from where we are, So hopefully in the process as well, including CSW, we will see now more commitment to resourcing, that those that need to be on those tables are there, and it's not just the usual faces.
Yeah. It's a 10-year plan, and it kind of comes together nicely in terms of Agenda 2030. But for a young woman thinking about the next 10 years, or a rural woman in one of our communities, how can we help them realize that this policy commitment that was birthed, if you want, in Beijing in 1995 is connected to their lives?
Even I was not there when all the various conferences happened, and when Beijing was put together, the action plan was put together. But I know how important that one particular document is for us, because at a time when there was a real realization that globally, that women matter, women are equal citizens. We do have the right to participate in all political processes, be in leadership, have our issues responded to in the same way as everyone else. So the key issues outlined in Beijing Platform for Action resonates even now, but I have to say that I, on the overall, have seen very little done to, say, for example, remove all the structural and systemic barriers that a woman would face. Because you take one indicator in the Pacific, and we look at women in our parliaments and in key leadership roles, we are not doing what we had committed to. So in that one particular area, how much more needs to be done to ensure that we have the kinds of representation that we've actually committed to? Because Beijing does not work alone. It works with CEDAW, and works with all the other documents, the Nairobi outcome document, etc. And it is one that, coming at the heels of ICPD, which talks about population and development and talks about sexual and reproductive health and rights. It's a key document because it captures all of those things, and I don't think there is another that does do that so well. And the fact that we have not achieved that, you can look at it to say, well, there was something really significant and right in it, that our leaders have agreed on to it. However, they've stepped back because all the other contextual issues that I've talked about have come into play, and the first point of regression is on women's rights and women's bodies. So that's what we can see, and that's what's happening even in our region.
So localization is key?
Localization is key, and we see some wonderful efforts in many different countries in our region, and but I don't think it's fast enough or good enough or deep enough so that it can sustain the kind of shocks that come into play, which dismantles these gains. So we need to make sure that we have legislation, we have policy that allows for progress in all the areas that Beijing asks for, because I don't think, as we say in mapping the progress for SDGs, that we have progressed in all the areas of Beijing, as well as SDGs.
So take action wherever you are, as 2020 will be an exciting year for a new wave of our activism with Beijing+25. It'll also be the 20th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325, and of course in our Pacific region, the next Pacific Women's Triennial Conference. It's time to further build alliances, promote innovation, and mobilize resources for equality, development, and peace.